The smell of burning wood hit Lucas Reed's nostrils before he even rounded the corner onto Main Street in Watsonville, California. And what he saw made his heart stop dead in his chest. The boarding house at the end of the street was engulfed in flames, thick black smoke pouring from the upper windows while tongues of orange fire licked at the wooden shingles. It was late summer in 1878, and everything was tinder dry. If that fire spread, the whole town could go up. Lucas spurred his horse forward, his boots already hitting the dirt before the animal fully stopped. People were running in all directions, some forming a bucket brigade from the nearby well, others just standing and watching in horror. The heat was intense even from 20 feet away, and he could hear the groans of timber beginning to give way inside the structure. "Is everyone out?" he shouted at a man near the front of the building. The man, old Thomas Webb, who ran the general store, shook his head frantically. "Miss Natalie." She went back in for her sister's locket, the fool girl. That was 2 minutes ago. Lucas did not think. He pulled his neckerchief up over his nose and mouth, soaked it quickly with water from someone's bucket, and ran straight for the front door. The heat slammed into him like a physical wall, but he pushed through, crouching low where the smoke was thinner. The main floor was a maze of flame and falling debris. He could hear the ceiling groaning above him, ready to collapse at any moment. "Hello," he shouted, his voice muffled by the cloth. "Anyone here?" A cough, weak and desperate, came from somewhere to his right. He turned toward it, dodging a falling beam that crashed down exactly where he had been standing a second before. The smoke was so thick he could barely see his hand in front of his face, but he followed the sound of coughing, moving by instinct and prayer. There, huddled in the corner of what looked like it had been a parlor, was a young woman. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins and hung around her face in wild waves. Her dress was singed at the hem, and she was clutching something small and golden in her fist. When she saw him, her eyes went wide with both hope and fear. "I cannot stand," she gasped. "My ankle, I twisted it." Lucas did not waste words. He scooped her up into his arms, feeling how she immediately wrapped her arms around his neck. She was light, but the smoke and heat were draining his strength fast. He turned back the way he had come, but a wall of fire now blocked that path. The flames had spread faster than he thought possible. "Hold on tight," he said, and she buried her face against his shoulder. He spotted a window on the far wall, still intact but surrounded by creeping fire. It was their only chance. With the woman secured in his arms, he ran at it, turning his shoulder at the last second to take the impact. The glass shattered around them as they crashed through, and for a moment they were falling, tumbling through the air. They hit the ground hard on the side of the building, rolling together down a slight embankment that Lucas had forgotten was there. The cool evening air hit his burning lungs like salvation. He could hear people shouting, running toward them. But for just a moment, it was only the two of them, lying in the dirt, gasping for breath. The woman was still in his arms, her face mere inches from his own. Her eyes were the most extraordinary shade of green he had ever seen, like spring grass after rain. Slowly, as if in a dream, she lifted her hands and placed them on either side of his face. Her palms were soft, despite the soot that covered them. She was looking at him with such intensity that it made his breath catch for reasons that had nothing to do with the smoke. "You are my hero," she whispered, and then she kissed him. It was not a long kiss, just a brief press of her lips against his, but it sent a shock through Lucas's entire body. Before he could react, before he could even process what had happened, people were pulling them apart, helping them to their feet, wrapping blankets around their shoulders and pressing water into their hands. The doctor, a portly man named Henderson, insisted on checking them both immediately. Lucas's hands were burned in places. Nothing serious, and he had breathed in too much smoke. The woman, he learned her name was Natalie Zimmerman, had the twisted ankle she had mentioned and some minor burns, but was otherwise unharmed. They sat side by side on the steps of the church across the street, watching as the bucket brigade finally got the fire under control. The boarding house was a total loss, just a smoking skeleton of charred timber, but at least it had not spread. "I am sorry," Natalie said suddenly. Her voice was hoarse from the smoke. "I should not have kissed you like that. It was improper. I was not thinking clearly." Lucas turned to look at her. Up close, even covered in soot and ash, she was beautiful. She had to be around his age, maybe 23 or 24 to his 26 years. There was something refined about her features, something that spoke of a life very different from the rough frontier town they now sat in. "I did not mind," he said, and was rewarded with a faint smile. "Still, it was forward of me. My mother would have been mortified." She looked down at her hands, at the small golden locket she still clutched. "This was hers, my mother's. She died 2 years ago, and my sister Sarah had it. Sarah passed last winter of fever, and I could not bear to lose this too. It was stupid to go back for it." "It was not stupid," Lucas said firmly. "We all have things that matter to us, things worth risking for." She looked at him again with those remarkable green eyes. "And what do you risk for, Mr. Reed?" "Lucas Reed. And mostly I risk getting trampled by ornery cattle or shot at by rustlers. I work the Double T Ranch about 10 miles east of here." "A cowboy," she said, and there was something in her voice he could not quite identify. Not disdain exactly, but perhaps surprise. "I suppose I should have guessed from the way you dress." "Though most cowboys I have seen do not usually crash through burning buildings." "Most cowboys I know would have done the same," Lucas said. "We take care of our own out here." "Am I your own?" The question was soft, almost teasing, but there was real curiosity behind it. Lucas felt heat in his face that had nothing to do with the fire. "Any person in trouble is my own, I reckon. That is just how I was raised." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the last of the flames being doused. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that eerily echoed the fire they had just escaped. "Where will you go?" Lucas asked. "You were staying at the boarding house," Natalie nodded. "I only arrived in Watsonville 3 days ago. I came from San Francisco to take a position as a schoolteacher. The school board arranged for me to stay at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house until I could find more permanent lodgings. Now, I suppose, I have neither lodging nor possessions, as everything I owned was in my room." Lucas's mind was already working. "The schoolhouse has a small room in the back. It is not much, just where the previous teacher stored supplies, but there is a cot. You could stay there temporarily." "I could not impose like that. It is not an imposition. The town needs a teacher, and you cannot teach if you are sleeping in the street." He stood up, offering her his hand. "Come on, let me help you over there. That ankle needs to be kept elevated." She hesitated for only a moment before taking his hand and letting him help her to her feet. When she put weight on her injured ankle, she winced, and without asking permission, Lucas simply lifted her into his arms again. "Mr. Reed," she protested, but she was already wrapping her arms around his neck. "Lucas," he corrected, "and this is faster than watching you hobble. That ankle will not heal right if you keep walking on it." The schoolhouse was only 2 blocks away, a tidy whitewashed building with a bell tower on top. Lucas carried Natalie the whole way, acutely aware of how she felt in his arms, the way her hair smelled like smoke and something floral underneath. People watched them as they passed, and he knew there would be talk, but he did not care. Let them talk. The back room was indeed small, barely big enough for the cot, a small table and a washstand. but it was clean and dry, and it had a door that locked. Lucas set Natalie down gently on the cot and found a crate to prop her injured foot on. "I will bring you some supplies," he said. "Food, water, maybe some clothes if I can find any in town." "You have already done so much," Natalie said. "I cannot ask you to do more." "You are not asking, I am offering." He moved toward the door, then paused. "That kiss earlier. I know you said it was improper, but I want you to know that I did not take offense. In fact, I was hoping maybe I could return the favor sometime." The smile she gave him then was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "I think I would like that very much, Lucas Reed." He left before he could do something foolish like kiss her right then and there. Outside, the night had fully fallen, and the street was quieter now that the fire was out. Lucas made his way to the general store, which stayed open late on Fridays. Thomas Webb was behind the counter, looking exhausted. "That was a brave thing you did, son," Thomas said as Lucas entered. "Damn foolish, but brave." "Miss Zimmerman needed help," Lucas said simply. "I need to buy some supplies for her. She lost everything in the fire." Thomas nodded knowingly. "I saw you carrying her to the schoolhouse. Starting tongues wagging, you two are. Let them wag." Lucas pulled out the money he had been saving for a new saddle. "I need a dress, maybe two if you have them. Some underthings, though I am not rightly sure what exactly women need in that department. Soap, a brush, some food that does not need cooking, a blanket, and a canteen." Thomas started gathering items. "The dresses I can do. Miss Webb is about the same size as Miss Zimmerman, I reckon. As for the underthings, I will put together what seems appropriate, and you can leave that part to the lady's discretion. This is going to cost you a fair bit. I have got the money." Lucas counted out bills on the counter, watching his savings disappear. He did not regret it for a second. By the time he made it back to the schoolhouse, his arms were full of packages. He knocked softly on the door of the back room, not wanting to startle Natalie if she had managed to fall asleep. "Come in," her voice called, still hoarse. She was still sitting on the cot, her foot propped up as he had left it. She had managed to wipe some of the soot off her face with water from the washstand, and he could see the true beauty of her features now. High cheekbones, a straight nose, lips that curved naturally upward as if she was always on the verge of smiling. "I brought some things," Lucas said, setting the packages on the small table. "Thomas Webb at the general store helped me pick out what he thought you would need. I am not exactly an expert on ladies' necessities." Natalie stood carefully, balancing on her good foot, and came to investigate the packages. As she unwrapped them, her eyes grew wider. "Lucas, this is too much. These must have cost you a fortune. It is just money. It is not worth much compared to a person's well-being." She pulled out one of the dresses, a simple blue calico that Thomas had assured him was appropriate for a schoolteacher. When she looked back at him, there were tears in her eyes. "No one has ever been this kind to me," she said softly. "Not since my family died." Lucas felt something twist in his chest. He wanted to ask about her family, about what had brought her to this small town in California, about everything that had made her who she was. But it was late, and she was exhausted, and there would be time for questions later. "You should rest," he said. "I will come by tomorrow to check on you and bring you some breakfast. Lucas." She caught his hand as he turned to leave. "Thank you, truly. You saved my life today, and now you are giving me everything I need to start over. I do not know how I will ever repay you." He looked down at their joined hands, at the way her slender fingers wrapped around his work-roughened ones. "You do not owe me anything, Natalie. I did what anyone would do." "No," she said firmly. "You did what a good man would do, and there are fewer of those in this world than there should be." That night, Lucas rode back to the Double T Ranch under a sky full of stars. but all he could see was green eyes and a smile that made him feel like he could punch through a burning building all over again. His boss, Timothy Thornton, was waiting up for him when he got back to the bunkhouse. "Heard you played hero in town today," Timothy said. He was a gruff man in his 50s, weathered by years under the sun, but fair and decent to his men. "News travels fast," Lucas said, stripping off his singed shirt and tossing it aside. The burns on his hands stung, but they would heal. "In a town this size, everything travels fast. They say you saved the new schoolteacher. Pretty thing, or so I heard." Lucas just grunted, not wanting to encourage the conversation, but Timothy was not deterred. "Also heard you spent a good chunk of change setting her up at the schoolhouse." "That is noble of you, Lucas, but do not go getting ideas above your station. A schoolteacher is not going to be interested in a cowhand." "I did not ask for your opinion on the matter," Lucas said, more sharply than he intended. Timothy held up his hands. "Easy, son. I am just trying to save you some heartache. You are one of my best men, and I would hate to see you get hurt." Lucas lay awake in his bunk long after the other men had started snoring. Timothy's words rattled around in his head, even though he did not want them to. It was true that he was just a cowboy, working for wages with no real prospects beyond maybe saving enough to start his own small spread someday. Natalie was educated, refined, the kind of woman who probably came from money and status back in San Francisco. What could he possibly offer her beyond a rescue from a fire? But then he remembered the way she had looked at him, the way she had kissed him, the warmth in her voice when she thanked him. That had to mean something. The next morning, Lucas was up before dawn. He did his chores in record time, then rode into town with a basket of food the ranch cook had helped him put together. Fresh bread, some cheese, apples from the cook's personal stash, and a jar of preserves. It was not fancy, but it was honest food. The schoolhouse was quiet when he arrived, but smoke was coming from the small chimney, so he knew Natalie was awake. He knocked on the door. "Just a moment." Her voice called, and then the door opened and she was standing there in one of the dresses he had bought, her hair pulled back in a simple bun. She looked fresh and lovely, though he could see she was favoring her injured ankle. "Lucas, I was hoping you would come." The smile on her face made his heart do strange things in his chest. "I brought breakfast," he said, holding up the basket. "Come in, please. I was just making tea." She limped back to the small table where a kettle was steaming on a tiny wood stove he had not noticed the night before. They ate together in the small room, and Lucas found himself telling her about the ranch, about the cattle drives he had been on, about growing up in Nevada territory before drifting down to California. She listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was really paying attention. In turn, she told him about her life. Her father had been a banker in San Francisco, relatively wealthy, and she had grown up with all the privileges that entailed. Private tutors, fancy dresses, parties with the city's elite. But her father had made bad investments, and when he died 5 years ago, there was almost nothing left. Her mother had struggled for 3 years before succumbing to pneumonia, and her older sister Sarah had tried to care for Natalie, but had died of fever the previous winter. "So I was alone," Natalie said, staring into her teacup. "With no money, no family, and no prospects. I had received a good education, so becoming a teacher seemed like the logical choice. When I saw the advertisement for a position in Watsonville, it felt like a sign. A new start, far from the memories of San Francisco. And then your boarding house burned down on your 3rd day here," Lucas said wryly. She laughed, and the sound was like music. "Yes, that was not part of the plan. But then again, neither was meeting a man who would risk his life for a stranger." "You are not a stranger anymore," Lucas said, the words coming out before he could stop them. Natalie reached across the small table and took his hand. "No, I suppose I am not." They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined across the table until Lucas reluctantly pulled away. "I should let you rest. Your ankle needs time to heal. When will I see you again?" The question was direct, no coy games or false modesty. "Tomorrow," Lucas suggested. "Or tonight if you need anything. Tomorrow is fine. And Lucas, would you escort me to church on Sunday? I want to meet the townspeople properly, and it would be nice to have a friendly face beside me." Lucas felt a grin spread across his face. "I would be honored." Over the next week, Lucas found excuses to visit Natalie every day. He brought her books borrowed from various townspeople, helped her arrange the schoolroom for the start of term the following week, and sat with her in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. Her ankle healed quickly, and soon she was walking without a limp. Sunday came, and Lucas wore his best clothes, which were not much, but at least they were clean and pressed. He had even trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair. When he arrived at the schoolhouse to collect Natalie, she took his breath away. She was wearing a green dress that matched her eyes, with her hair arranged in an elegant style that must have taken her an hour to achieve. "You look beautiful," he said, the words tumbling out without thought. She blushed, a pink tinge spreading across her cheeks. "And you look very handsome. Shall we?" Walking into church with Natalie on his arm was one of the proudest moments of Lucas's life. He could feel every eye in the building on them, could hear the whispers starting up, but he did not care. Let them look. Let them talk. This woman, this incredible, brave, beautiful woman had chosen to be seen with him. After the service, the pastor's wife, Mrs. Coleman, approached them with a warm smile. "Miss Zimmerman, we are so glad you are recovering well. And we are very much looking forward to having you as our teacher. The children have been without proper schooling for 3 months now." "I am eager to begin," Natalie said graciously. "I love working with children." Other townspeople came up to introduce themselves, and Lucas watched as Natalie charmed each one. She had a natural grace, a way of making people feel heard and valued. It was a skill born from her upbringing in San Francisco society, he supposed, but it did not feel false or manipulative. She genuinely seemed to care about the people she was meeting. Thomas Webb pulled Lucas aside at one point. "That is quite a woman you have got there," he said, nodding toward Natalie. "The whole town is talking about you too." "We are just friends," Lucas said, though even to his own ears it sounded weak. Thomas snorted. "Friends do not look at each other the way you two do. Mark my words, you will be married before the year is out." The thought sent a thrill through Lucas, followed immediately by doubt. Marriage. Could he really aspire to that with someone like Natalie? He was a cowboy with barely 2 nickels to rub together. What kind of life could he offer her? As if reading his thoughts, Timothy Thornton approached. "Reid, got a word." Lucas excused himself and followed his boss a short distance away. Timothy looked serious. "I have been watching you this past week," Timothy said without preamble, "seeing how you are with that girl, and I have been thinking. You have been with me for 3 years now, and you are the best hand I have got. I have been wanting to make you foreman for a while, but I was not sure you would stick around. But if you are thinking about settling down, maybe starting a family, then I reckon you might be ready for more responsibility." Lucas stared at him. "Foreman, that would mean—" "Double pay," Timothy confirmed. "And the little house on the north edge of my property. It needs some fixing up, but it has got good bones. A man could raise a family there." It was too much, too fast. "Timothy, I do not know what to say." "Say yes. You have earned it, Lucas. And between you and me, if you let that girl slip away because you think you are not good enough, you are a bigger fool than I took you for. She looks at you like you hung the moon." Lucas glanced back at Natalie, who was chatting animatedly with Mrs. Coleman and some other ladies. As if sensing his gaze, she looked over and gave him a smile that made his knees weak. "Yes," he said to Timothy, his eyes still on Natalie. "Yes, I will take the position." That evening, Lucas walked Natalie back to the schoolhouse as the sun was setting. He had not told her about the foreman position yet. Part of him wanted to save it for the right moment to make it special. "I have enjoyed today very much," Natalie said as they reached her door. "Everyone in town has been so welcoming. I think I am going to be very happy here." "I am glad," Lucas said. They stood facing each other in the fading light, and the air between them felt charged with possibility. "Lucas, can I ask you something?" Natalie's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Anything. That day in the fire when I kissed you, did you feel what I felt?" His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "What did you feel?" "Like I had been waiting my whole life for that moment. Like everything that came before, all the loss and pain and struggle, was leading me to you." She looked down at her hands. "I know it sounds foolish. We barely knew each other. We still barely know each other. But I cannot shake this feeling that you are important, that we are important." Lucas reached out and gently lifted her chin so she was looking at him again. "It does not sound foolish. I felt it too. I still feel it. Every time I look at you, every time I hear your voice, I feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." "Then why have you not kissed me again?" The question was bold, direct, so very Natalie. Lucas smiled. "Because I wanted to make sure I had the right. That first kiss you gave to me out of gratitude and shock. The next kiss I wanted to be because you chose it, clear-headed and certain." "I am choosing it now," Natalie whispered. "I am choosing you." He kissed her then, properly this time. His hands cupped her face gently as his lips met hers, and it was everything he had been imagining all week. She tasted sweet, like the honey cake they had shared after church, and she melted into him with a small sigh that made his blood sing. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and for a long moment, the whole world narrowed down to just the two of them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Natalie rested her forehead against his. "Well," she said, a bit breathless, "that was worth waiting for." Lucas laughed, the sound full of joy. "I have something to tell you. Timothy offered me a promotion today, foreman of the Double T with double wages and a house on the property." Natalie pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. "Lucas, that is wonderful. You must have accepted." "I did. And I accepted thinking about what it might mean. A foreman's wage is enough to support a family. The house needs work, but it could be made into a real home." He took her hands in his. "I know we have only known each other a week. I know by all rights I should wait, should court you properly for months before saying any of this. But Natalie, I am not a patient man when I know what I want, and I want you. I want a future with you." Tears were streaming down Natalie's face, but she was smiling. "I want that too. I want it so much." "Then we will take it slow, do this right," Lucas said, even though every fiber of his being wanted to propose to her right then and there. "I will court you properly, but I need you to know that my intentions are serious. I am not playing games with your heart." "And I am not playing games with yours," Natalie said firmly. She kissed him again, quick and sweet. "Now go, before the neighbors start gossiping even more than they already are. I will see you tomorrow and every day after," Lucas promised. The next few months were the happiest of Lucas's life. He threw himself into his new role as foreman, working hard to justify Timothy's faith in him. The extra money meant he could start fixing up the little house on the north edge of the property. It was a modest place, just 4 rooms, but it had a good roof and a stone fireplace. Lucas spent every spare moment working on it, replacing broken floorboards, whitewashing the walls, fixing the crooked shutters. Meanwhile, Natalie had started teaching, and the children of Watsonville adored her. Lucas would sometimes ride by the schoolhouse during the day just to hear her voice drifting out the window as she taught reading or arithmetic. She had a gift for making learning exciting, for making each child feel valued and capable. In the evenings, they would take walks together through town or out into the countryside. They talked about everything, their hopes, their fears, their dreams for the future. Natalie told him she had always wanted children, a whole house full of them, noisy and chaotic and full of love. Lucas confessed that he had always dreamed of having his own ranch someday, a place he could build with his own hands and pass down to his children. "We could do both," Natalie said one evening as they sat together on a blanket watching the sunset. "Your ranch and my house full of children." "Is that a hint?" Lucas teased, pulling her close. She laughed and rested her head on his shoulder. "Maybe. Is it working?" "It might be." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. She always smelled like lavender now, since he had bought her some lavender soap from the general store. "Natalie, I want to ask you something important." She sat up, turning to face him, her expression suddenly serious. "All right." Lucas had planned this moment for weeks, had rehearsed what he would say 100 times in his head. But now that the moment was here, all his prepared words flew away. Instead, he just spoke from the heart. "I love you," he said simply. "I have loved you since the moment you put your hands on my face and called me your hero. I love your kindness, your strength, your laugh, the way you believe in me even when I do not believe in myself. I know I am just a cowboy, and you deserve someone who can give you all the fine things you grew up with. But I promise you, if you will have me, I will spend every day of my life trying to make you happy. I will work myself to the bone to give you a good life. I will love you and honor you and stand by you no matter what comes." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It had taken him 3 weeks' wages to buy the ring inside, but it was worth every penny. The band was silver with a small diamond, modest by the standards of what Natalie had probably been used to in San Francisco, but bought with honest money and given with an honest heart. "Natalie Zimmerman, will you marry me?" Natalie had started crying the moment he said he loved her, and now tears were streaming down her face. But she was smiling too, that beautiful radiant smile that made his heart soar. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Lucas, I will marry you. I love you too so much. And you are wrong about one thing. You are not just a cowboy. You are the bravest, kindest, most wonderful man I have ever met. You are everything I want, everything I need. I do not care about fine things or high society, I just care about you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then they were kissing and laughing and holding each other as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. They were married 6 weeks later in the little church in Watsonville. It was a simple ceremony but well attended. Half the town showed up, along with all the men from the Double T Ranch. Natalie wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself with help from some of the town women. Lucas wore a new suit that he had ordered specially from San Francisco, wanting to look his best for his bride. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, and Lucas kissed Natalie in front of all those witnesses, he felt like the luckiest man alive. This woman, this incredible woman, had chosen him, had agreed to build a life with him. It was more than he had ever dared to dream. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food provided by everyone in town. There was music and dancing, and Lucas held Natalie close as they swayed to a fiddle tune under the stars. "Happy, Mrs. Reid," he whispered in her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she whispered back. They spent their wedding night in the little house that Lucas had spent months fixing up. He had saved the inside as a surprise for Natalie, and when he carried her over the threshold and lit the lamps, she gasped. The main room was simple but cozy, with a good rug on the floor and curtains on the windows. There was a solid table and chairs that Lucas had built himself, and a rocking chair by the fireplace that he had bought thinking of future children. The bedroom had a large bed with a quilt that the ladies of the church had made as a wedding present, and there were fresh flowers in a vase on the dresser. "Lucas, it is perfect," Natalie said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "Absolutely perfect." "It is ours," he said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Our home. The beginning of our life together." That night, they made love for the first time, slow and tender and full of whispered declarations. Lucas had been with women before, quick encounters that meant nothing, but this was different. This was his wife, the woman he loved, and every touch felt sacred. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Lucas ran his fingers through Natalie's loose hair. "I cannot believe you are really mine," he said softly. "I was yours from the moment you ran into that burning building," Natalie replied, tracing patterns on his chest with her finger. "I think I knew even then, somehow, that you were the one I had been waiting for." Life settled into a beautiful rhythm after that. Lucas worked the ranch during the day, coming home in the evenings to Natalie and a hot meal and the quiet contentment of domestic life. Natalie continued teaching, pouring her heart into her students. On weekends, they would work together on improving their little house and the land around it. Lucas started saving again, this time toward buying some cattle of his own. Timothy had promised to let him graze them on Double T land until he could afford his own spread. 4 months after their wedding, Natalie came to Lucas with news that made his heart nearly burst with joy. She was pregnant. Their first child would arrive in late summer. Lucas immediately became overprotective, insisting that Natalie stop teaching and rest. She laughed at his fussing, but agreed to take a leave from the school for the remainder of the term and the following year. Her health and the baby's health came first. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Lucas found himself falling even more in love with his wife as he watched her body change and grow. She would sit in the rocking chair in the evenings, her hands resting on her swelling belly, and talk to the baby about all the things they would do together. Lucas would sit at her feet, his head resting against her knee, and imagine the family they were creating. Their son was born on a sweltering August day in 1879. The labor was long and difficult, and Lucas paced outside the bedroom door while the midwife and Mrs. Coleman tended to Natalie. When he finally heard the baby's first cry, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Coleman emerged, smiling. "You have got a son, Lucas, a healthy boy, and your wife is tired but well. You can go in now." Lucas entered the bedroom to find Natalie propped up against the pillows, exhausted but glowing, with a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up at him with such love that it brought tears to his eyes. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Lucas approached almost reverently, looking down at the small, scrunched face of his newborn boy. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving tiny fists in the air. "He is perfect," Lucas breathed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but had never settled on one. Now, looking at her husband and son, Natalie said, "I was thinking Samuel Reed. It means God has heard, and I feel like all my prayers have been answered with you and now with him." "Samuel," Lucas repeated, testing it out. "I like it. Samuel Reed." He reached out and gently touched the baby's cheek with one finger. "Welcome to the world, Sam." The next few years were a blur of joy and hard work. Samuel grew from a tiny infant into a rambunctious toddler who kept both his parents on their toes. Lucas continued to excel as foreman of the Double T, and his small herd of personal cattle grew steadily. Natalie was content to be a mother for now, though she talked about returning to teaching once Sam was older. When Samuel was 2 years old, Natalie found herself pregnant again. This time she carried twin girls, and her pregnancy was more difficult than the first had been. Lucas worried constantly, but Natalie remained calm and confident. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him when he fussed over her. "I am strong and I have the best care. Everything will be fine." She was right. The twins, Mary and Ruth, were born healthy and loud in the spring of 1882. Suddenly, their little house seemed very full, with 3 children under the age of 4. Lucas built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms so the children would have space to grow. Money was tight with 3 children to feed and clothe, but they were happy. Samuel was a sweet boy, gentle with his baby sisters and endlessly curious about the world around him. Mary and Ruth were fraternal twins, alike in some ways but different in others. Mary was bold and adventurous, always climbing things she should not climb. Ruth was quieter, more thoughtful, content to sit with her mother and look at picture books. One evening, when the children were all finally asleep, Lucas and Natalie sat together on the porch of their house, watching the stars come out. It had been 6 years since the fire that brought them together, 6 years of building a life and a family. "You ever regret it?" Lucas asked suddenly. "Giving up the life you could have had in San Francisco for this?" Natalie looked at him in genuine surprise. "How could you even ask that?" "Lucas, you and these children are everything to me. I have never been happier in my life. This is the life I was meant to have. Even though it is hard sometimes. Even though we do not have much," she took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "We have everything that matters. We have love, we have health, we have our children. Yes, it is hard sometimes. Yes, money is tight and there is always more work to be done than hours in the day, but I would not trade this life for anything. Would you?" "Never," Lucas said fiercely. He pulled her close and kissed her. "I love you more today than I did 6 years ago, and I will love you even more tomorrow." "And I love you," Natalie said. "My hero, my husband, my home." When Samuel was 5, he started school, and Natalie returned to teaching part-time. Lucas had saved enough money to buy a small parcel of land adjacent to the Double T, 50 acres that he could call his own. It was not much, but it was a start. He began building his own herd in earnest, working longer hours to make his dream of owning a real ranch a reality. Timothy Thornton, now approaching 70 and with no children of his own, had grown fond of Lucas and his family. He often joked that Lucas was like the son he never had. When Samuel turned 6, Timothy started teaching the boy to ride, giving him a gentle old mare as a gift. The years rolled on, full of small joys and minor setbacks. There were hard winters when money was especially tight, and hot summers when the cattle struggled and Lucas worried about making ends meet. But there were also birthday celebrations and Christmas mornings, school plays where Samuel recited poetry, and the twins sang in the church choir. There were quiet Sunday afternoons with the whole family together, and passionate nights when Lucas and Natalie found time to remember they were not just parents but lovers too. When the twins were 6 and Samuel was 8, Natalie found herself pregnant again, much to their surprise. She was 31 now, and they had thought their family was complete. But this baby, another boy they named Matthew, was welcomed with open arms and much love from his older siblings. It was around this time that Timothy Thornton's health began to fail. He had been slowing down for years, but a bad fall from his horse left him with a broken hip that never healed properly. He could no longer manage the ranch, and one evening he called Lucas into his office. "I am going to be straight with you," Timothy said, looking older and more tired than Lucas had ever seen him. "I do not have much time left, and I have got no family to leave this place to. I have been thinking about what to do with the double T, and I have decided I want you to have it." Lucas stared at him in shock. "Timothy, I cannot accept that. This ranch is worth a fortune." "And you have earned every acre of it," Timothy said firmly. "You have been like a son to me, Lucas. You have worked this land for over a decade, poured your heart and soul into it. Who better to carry it on? Besides, I have talked to my lawyer. My will is already written. When I die, the double T goes to you along with everything on it. All I ask is that you keep the name and that you remember an old man who saw something special in you." Lucas had tears in his eyes. "Timothy, I do not know what to say. Say you will do it. Say you will build something lasting here, something you can pass down to those fine children of yours." "I will," Lucas promised, "and I will make you proud." Timothy Thornton died peacefully in his sleep 3 months later. His funeral was well attended, and Lucas gave a eulogy that left hardly a dry eye in the church. True to his word, Timothy had left the Double T Ranch to Lucas, all 5,000 acres of it. Suddenly, Lucas Reed was not just a cowboy or even a foreman. He was a rancher, a landowner, a man of means. It was overwhelming and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "We will do this together," Natalie told him the night after the will was read. "Just like we have done everything else, together." And they did. Lucas threw himself into running the ranch, implementing new ideas and improvements. Natalie managed the books and the household, her education proving invaluable as she navigated the financial complexities of running such a large operation. The children grew and took on more responsibilities. Samuel, now 10, started working with the cattle alongside his father. The twins helped their mother with the younger children and the house. The Double T prospered under Lucas's management. He was a fair employer, paying his ranch hands decent wages and treating them with respect. He invested in quality breeding stock, and the herd grew in both size and value. Within 5 years, the Double T was one of the most successful ranches in the region. But success did not change Lucas and Natalie at their core. They still lived simply, though comfortably. They still attended church every Sunday and participated in town events. They still remembered what it was like to struggle, and they were generous with those who were struggling now. When Samuel turned 16, Lucas took him aside for a serious conversation. "This ranch will be yours someday, son. Yours and your siblings. But I want you to understand that it is not just a business. It is a responsibility. We employ 30 men and their families depend on us. The town depends on us buying supplies and supporting local businesses. We have been blessed, and with blessing comes obligation." Samuel, tall and serious like his father, nodded. "I understand, Pa. I will do my best to be worthy of it." "You already are, son," Lucas said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You already are." The twins, now 13, were growing into remarkable young women. Mary had her mother's green eyes and fearless spirit, while Ruth had inherited Lucas's steady calm. Matthew, now 7, was a sweet boy with a gift for gentling horses. Natalie, at 36, was still as beautiful as the day Lucas had pulled her from the fire, though her dark hair now had threads of silver in it. She had returned to teaching full-time once Matthew started school, and the children of Watsonville loved her as much as her own children did. One evening, nearly 20 years after the fire that had brought them together, Lucas and Natalie took a walk out to the spot where they had first kissed. It was a warm summer night, and the stars were brilliant overhead. "You remember this place?" Natalie asked, a smile playing at her lips. "I remember every moment with you," Lucas said, pulling her into his arms. "I remember how scared I was that day, thinking I might not get you out in time. I remember how you looked at me with those green eyes and called me your hero. I remember thinking I would do anything to keep seeing that look on your face. You are still my hero, Natalie said, reaching up to touch his face the same way she had all those years ago. Every single day. The way you love our children, the way you have built this life for us, the way you still look at me like I am the most precious thing in your world. You are, Lucas said simply. You always will be. They kissed under the stars, two people who had found each other in the chaos and terror of a fire and had built something beautiful from those ashes. Their love had not just survived but had grown deeper and richer with each passing year. As they walked back to the house, hand in hand, they could see lights in the windows and hear the sounds of their children inside. Samuel was probably reading in his room. The twins were likely arguing over something inconsequential the way sisters do. Matthew was supposed to be asleep but was probably sneaking looks at his favorite picture book. We did well, Natalie said softly. We did better than well, Lucas corrected. We built a home. A real home, full of love and laughter and memories. That is more than most people ever get. The years continued to pass. Samuel fell in love with a girl from town, a sweet-natured young woman named Elizabeth, and married her when he was 21. They built a house on the far edge of the ranch property and started their own family. Mary shocked everyone by deciding she wanted to go to college, a rare thing for a woman in 1893, but Lucas and Natalie supported her decision. Ruth married a lawyer from Sacramento and moved to the city, though she visited often. Matthew showed no interest in ranching, preferring to work with horses, so Lucas helped him start a breeding and training business. Lucas and Natalie became grandparents, then grandparents many times over. Samuel and Elizabeth had 4 children. Ruth had 2. Even Mary, despite her education and career as a teacher in San Francisco, eventually married and had 3 children of her own. Matthew married late but happily, to a widow with 2 children of her own, and they added 2 more to their blended family. The Double T continued to prosper, becoming one of the largest and most respected ranches in California. Lucas eventually stepped back from day-to-day operations, letting Samuel take over as he had always planned. But he still rode the property most days, checking on the cattle and the land he loved. Natalie retired from teaching when she was 55, after 30 years of shaping young minds. The town held a celebration in her honor, with former students coming from all over California to pay tribute to the woman who had taught them to read and think and dream. Lucas and Natalie grew old together, their hair going white, their steps slowing, but their love never diminishing. They sat on the porch of their house in the evenings, watching grandchildren play in the yard, and remembered all the years that had brought them to this point. "Did I ever tell you," Natalie said one evening when she was 62 and Lucas was 65, "that I knew I would marry you that very first day? When you pulled me from the fire," Lucas smiled, reaching for her hand. "You never mentioned it. How could you have known?" "I just did," she said simply. "The way you looked at me, the way you did not hesitate to risk everything for a stranger, I thought, that is the kind of man I want to spend my life with. And then when you were so kind afterward, bringing me clothes and food, making sure I was cared for. I fell in love with you a little more each day until I was completely gone." "I fell fast too," Lucas admitted. "Probably the moment you called me your hero. No one had ever looked at me that way before, like I mattered, like I was someone special. I wanted to be that person for you, the man you saw when you looked at me." "You have always been that person," Natalie said. "From the very beginning, my hero, my love, my life." When Lucas was 68, he suffered a heart attack while out riding the property. He survived, but the doctor warned that his heart was weak and he needed to take things easy. Lucas, stubborn as ever, ignored this advice as much as he could, but Natalie kept a close eye on him, making sure he did not overdo it. They had 42 years together, 42 years of love and partnership and shared dreams. When Lucas died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 71, Natalie was beside him, holding his hand the way she had held it 1,000 times before. The funeral was the largest Watsonville had ever seen. People came from all over California to pay their respects to Lucas Reed, the cowboy who had built an empire through hard work and integrity, the man who had saved a woman from a fire and built a life with her that became the stuff of local legend. Natalie stood at the graveside, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and she did not cry. She had shed her tears in private. Now, in public, she was strong, remembering the man Lucas had been and celebrating the life they had shared. She lived another 6 years without him, staying active and involved in her children's and grandchildren's lives. She told stories about their father and grandfather, making sure the younger generation knew the kind of man Lucas had been. She talked about the fire that had brought them together, about those early years of struggle and joy, about building the Double T into what it was today. When Natalie died at the age of 77, it was in her sleep, peacefully, like Lucas. She was buried beside him, their graves side by side under a large oak tree on a hill overlooking the Double T. Their tombstones were simple but elegant, with their names and dates, and beneath Lucas's name, an inscription that Natalie had requested years before. "He ran into the fire and saved more than my life." And beneath Natalie's name, an inscription that Samuel had chosen. She held his face and called him her hero, and he spent his life proving her right. The Double T Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passed down through Samuel's line, then his children's children. The house that Lucas had built was preserved and expanded, becoming the heart of a sprawling family compound. Every generation heard the story of Lucas and Natalie, of the fire that brought them together, of the love that sustained them through decades of life. In the main house, in a place of honor above the fireplace, hung 2 items: a slightly charred golden locket on a delicate chain, and a faded photograph of a young couple on their wedding day. The woman in the photograph has dark hair and striking green eyes, and she is looking at the man beside her with such love that it shines through even the old, faded picture. The man is looking at her the same way, and anyone who sees the photograph can tell that these 2 people loved each other completely. Visitors to the ranch would often ask about the photograph and the locket, and whoever was home would tell them the story. About the fire in Watsonville in 1878, about the cowboy who risked his life to save a stranger, about the woman who called him her hero and meant it with every fiber of her being. They would tell about the life that couple built together, about the family they raised, about the legacy of love and hard work and integrity they left behind. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go when their earthly journey is done, Lucas and Natalie Reed were together still, hands intertwined, looking at each other with the same love they had shared for more than 4 decades. She was still his reason for being brave, and he was still her hero, now and forever, bound together by a love that had been forged in fire and had burned bright until their final days. Their story lived on in Watsonville, told and retold, embellished slightly with each generation but always true in its essence. It was a story about love found in the most unexpected circumstances, about 2 people who chose each other every single day, about building something lasting from a moment of crisis and connection. It was the story of Lucas and Natalie Reed, the cowboy and the schoolteacher, the hero and the woman who saw him for what he truly was. And it all started with a fire, a rescue, 2 hands on a face, and 4 words that changed everything. You are my hero.